In the cold dark between the stars, there exists a soldier, unlike any other in human history. He stands nearly 9 feet tall in his armor, his bones reinforced with ceramic lattice, his blood carrying organs no ordinary human possesses. He has not aged in the way other men age. He has not known fear in the way other men know it, not since the day his body was unmade and remade by surgeons who treated his transformation as both science and sacrament. He fights wars that span centuries. He guards worlds he will never set foot on again. He is brother to thousands he has never met, and stranger to nearly everyone else. For 10,000 years, this warrior has stood between humanity and extinction. He is known by many names across the galaxy, but history remembers him best as the Space Marine, a title that scarcely conveys what he actually is. To call him a soldier is accurate, but incomplete. To call him superhuman is closer to the truth, though even that phrase fails to capture the scale of his transformation. How does an ordinary boy become this? What happens inside the laboratories and chapter keeps where this transformation takes place? And what does it cost the one who survives it? And once made, how is he organized, governed and deployed across a galaxy at war with itself and everything beyond it? The answers begin not on a battlefield, but in the genetic laboratories of a being whose ambition would reshape the future of an entire species. The story of the Space Marine begins with a single figure, the Emperor of Mankind, a ruler whose origins remain shrouded in deliberate obscurity, but whose genius in matters of genetic science has never been disputed. In the era before the founding of the Imperium, as humanity expanded outward into a galaxy fractured by war and isolation, the Emperor recognized that conventional armies, however vast, would never be sufficient to reunite a scattered species. What he required was something closer to a new branch of humanity altogether. Soldiers who could match the superhuman threats already emerging in the galaxy's darker corners. His solution was the creation of 20 genetic templates, each one a complete blueprint for a transformed human being. These templates were called Primarchs, and they were not ordinary soldiers, but something closer to demigods, engineered to possess strength, intellect, and resilience far beyond any baseline human. Yet the Primarchs themselves were never intended to fight alone. Each carried within his body a genetic code that could be extracted, studied, and replicated, allowing the creation of legions in his image. These genetic materials, drawn from the Primarchs and refined further by the Emperor's own research, became the foundation for what would later be called the Adeptus Astartes, a Latin-derived term meaning, roughly, the adepts of the stars. The Primarchs themselves were scattered across the galaxy by forces still not fully understood, landing on disparate worlds and growing to adulthood under wildly different conditions, each shaped by the culture that raised him. When the Emperor eventually recovered them, each Primarch was given command of a legion bearing his genetic signature. These legions became the first Space Marines, the instruments of the Great Crusade, a campaign of reunification that would, for a time, bring much of human-occupied space back under a single banner. It is important to understand that the Space Marine was never simply a product of training, however rigorous. He was, from his very conception, a deliberate act of genetic engineering, designed to exceed the boundaries of what a human body could endure or accomplish. What separates him from the ordinary soldier lies not in discipline alone, but in the very architecture of his biology. To understand the Space Marine, one must first understand the materials from which he is built. At the heart of his transformation lies a set of 19 biological implants, each one an organ not found in any natural human being, grown in vats and surgically placed within the recruit's body over a period of years. These organs are collectively responsible for granting him strength, resilience, and senses that exceed baseline humanity by staggering margins. The process does not begin with these implants, however. It begins with selection, and selection begins with cruelty, disguised as mercy. Across the thousands of worlds under Imperial control, chapters of Space Marines send recruiters, sometimes called chaplains or specially designated officers, to identify candidates suited for transformation. The criteria vary by chapter and by world, but certain qualities recur: physical resilience, aggression tempered by discipline, and above all, a willingness to endure suffering without breaking. On many worlds, this selection takes the form of brutal trials, contests of survival, in which only a fraction of participants live to be chosen. Other chapters favor youths raised in conditions of extreme hardship, reasoning that those who have already survived deprivation will better withstand the trials ahead. In every case, the candidates are typically adolescent boys, their bodies still developing, since the transformation process requires a frame young enough to be reshaped without rejecting the changes imposed upon it. Once selected, a recruit becomes what is termed an aspirant, and his old life ends in every meaningful sense. He is taken from his home world, often never to return, and brought into the fortress monastery of his chapter, a structure that will become not only training ground, but spiritual home for whatever remains of his life. There, under the supervision of apothecaries, the chapter's specialized surgeon priests, the long process of implantation begins. The first organ typically introduced is the secondary heart, doubling the recruit's cardiovascular capacity and ensuring that even catastrophic injury to one heart will not prove immediately fatal. This is followed, over months and years, by further implants. An organ called the os modular, which triggers accelerated bone growth and density, fusing the recruit's skeleton into something closer to ceramite than calcium. A biscopea, which stimulates dramatic muscle growth beyond any natural human limit. A hemastomen, which allows for the safe integration of further implants by regulating the body's blood chemistry during the ordeal. Each of these procedures carries genuine risk of death, and chapters universally lose a significant percentage of their aspirants during this stage, the bodies of the weak or incompatible failing under the strain of transformation. Later, implants refine senses and add entirely new capabilities. The Lyman's ear enhances hearing to a degree that allows a space marine to detect threats invisible to ordinary perception, while filtering out sounds that might otherwise cause damage or disorientation. The oculobe sharpens vision, granting limited night sight and the ability to perceive details at extreme range. Perhaps most distinctive is the Becher's gland, which allows the space marine to produce a corrosive saliva capable of dissolving organic matter, a trait inherited from ancient survivalist adaptations woven into his genetic template. The Susan membrane permits him to enter a hibernation-like coma, slowing bodily functions to a near standstill, allowing him to survive otherwise fatal injuries by suspending the dying process itself until medical aid arrives. Among the final and most significant implants is the black carapace, a layer of bioengineered skin grown across much of the body in the later stages of training. This carapace contains thousands of neural interface points that allow a space marine to connect directly with his power armor, transforming the suit from mere protection into something closer to a second skin. Through this connection, the armor responds to his thoughts and movements with a fluidity no external control system could replicate, and the warrior inside becomes, in a very real sense, fused with his battle gear. By the time this process concludes, the recruit who entered as a boy has become something else entirely. His skeleton has been reinforced and partially restructured. His blood carries oxygen with far greater efficiency, His skin has thickened, his reflexes have sharpened beyond ordinary human capacity, and his mind, hardened by years of indoctrination alongside physical transformation, has been shaped to withstand horrors that would break the sanity of an untransformed soldier. He no longer requires the same food, sleep, or warmth that sustains ordinary men. He can survive in vacuum for short periods, endure toxins that would kill instantly, and recover from wounds that would be fatal to any baseline human. Yet this transformation is not without cost. Many chapters report instances of genetic instability, flaws inherited from the specific primarch whose lineage they carry, manifesting as everything from excessive aggression to physical mutation in rare cases. The genoseed, as this genetic material is called, must be carefully harvested from veteran space marines and implanted in the next generation, a delicate biological inheritance passed down like a sacred trust, and its purity is a matter of constant vigilance, since corruption or degradation in the genoseed can compromise an entire chapter's future. A transformed space marine does not exist as an individual soldier in the way a conscript or mercenary might. He belongs, body and soul, to an institution called a chapter, a self-contained military and religious order, numbering, by ancient decree, no more than 1,000 battle brothers. This number was fixed in the aftermath of a great civil war that nearly destroyed the Imperium from within, a conflict in which several legions, each numbering in the tens of thousands, turned against their fellow soldiers and the Emperor himself. In the war's aftermath, the surviving loyalist legions were broken apart and reorganized into smaller, more numerous chapters, a reform intended to prevent any single commander from again wielding the kind of overwhelming military force that had nearly toppled the Imperium. Each chapter operates from a fortress monastery, often situated on a world the chapter calls its own, though some chapters operate instead from starships, never settling on any single planet. Within this fortress, the 1,000 brothers of the chapter are organized into 10 companies, each company structured for a particular role in battle and in the chapter's internal hierarchy. The first company holds a place of particular honor, composed entirely of veteran warriors who have proven themselves across decades or centuries of warfare. These veterans often operate as terminators, clad in the heaviest and most ancient suits of armor a chapter possesses, deployed only in the most desperate engagements where their experience and resilience can turn the tide of battle. Companies 2 through 5 are designated battle companies, the backbone of a chapter's fighting strength, composed of seasoned brothers organized into squads of 10, each squad capable of independent operation or coordination within a larger force. Companies 6 through 9 serve more specialized roles. Some are designated reserve companies, holding brothers skilled in particular forms of combat, whether long-range engagement, heavy weapon support, or rapid assault tactics. The 10th company, meanwhile, is composed of the chapter's newest members, scouts who have completed their physical transformation, but have not yet earned the right to don full-power armor. These scouts serve a probationary period, proving themselves in reconnaissance and unconventional warfare before being elevated to the ranks of a battle company. Command of the chapter falls to the chapter master, a figure who holds near absolute authority over his brothers, advised by a council of senior officers that typically includes the master of the librarius, who oversees the chapter's psychically gifted brothers, the master of the apothecarian, responsible for the chapter's medical and genetic affairs, and the master of the chapter's chaplaincy, who tends to the spiritual and ideological discipline of the brotherhood. Chaplains hold a unique and important role within every chapter, serving simultaneously as religious leaders, battlefield commanders, and keepers of a chapter's traditions and history, ensuring that the brutal trials of transformation are matched by an equally rigorous shaping of belief and purpose. Beyond the standard structure followed by most chapters, certain orders maintain their own distinct traditions, inherited from the particular primarch whose genocide they carry, or shaped by centuries of independent history. Some chapters emphasize stealth and unconventional tactics. Others maintain rigid codes of honor, governing how and when they may engage an enemy. A small number operate entirely outside the standard organizational framework, answering to ancient charters that grant them freedoms other chapters do not possess. This diversity, while occasionally a source of friction with the wider imperial hierarchy, is generally tolerated, since the Imperium has long understood that rigid uniformity among its most elite warriors can prove as dangerous as the enemies they are meant to fight. Within the vast and labyrinthine structure of imperial governance, the Space Marine occupies a position that is at once central and apart. He answers, in theory, to the High Lords of Terror, the council that governs in the Emperor's name from the Imperial Palace, on humanity's homeworld. In practice, each chapter operates with extraordinary independence, bound more by tradition, oath, and the watchful authority of the Adeptus Terror than by any direct chain of command. A chapter master answers to almost no one in matters of internal discipline, recruitment, or the deployment of his own forces, save in the rare circumstance that a sector or planetary governor formally requests Astartes' intervention through established channels, or that a crisis demands the attention of the wider Imperium. This independence exists by design. The Space Marine chapters were never intended to function as a standing army in the conventional sense, mustered and directed by distant bureaucrats. Rather, each chapter exists as a self-sufficient instrument of war, capable of identifying threats within its sphere of operation and responding without waiting for permission that might arrive too late to matter. A single company of battle brothers, properly equipped and deployed, can achieve victories that would require entire regiments of the Astra Militarum, the vast conscripted armies that form the backbone of the Imperium's conventional military strength. Where the Imperial Guard, as these armies are commonly known, relies on overwhelming numbers and attritional warfare, the Space Marine relies on precision, superior physiology, and centuries of accumulated battlefield wisdom passed down through training and, in some unverified accounts, through fragments of memory embedded within the genocide itself. This is not to suggest that Space Marines operate without coordination or oversight. The Inquisition, an organization tasked with rooting out heresy, mutation, and threats from beyond the material universe, maintains the authority to investigate any chapter suspected of corruption or deviation from imperial doctrine, a power that has occasionally led to entire chapters being declared traitor and hunted to extinction. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the technological priesthood responsible for maintaining and supplying much of the Imperium's war machinery, supplies chapters with weapons, armor, and starships, creating a relationship of mutual dependence between warrior and artisan. And in times of galaxy-spanning crisis, multiple chapters may be called together under unified command, forming what is termed a crusade force, capable of waging war on a scale no single chapter could achieve alone. Yet for all this cooperation, the defining characteristic of the Space Marine's role remains his function as a first responder to catastrophe. When a world is invaded by alien forces, when a planet's population rises in heretical rebellion, when creatures from beyond reality itself tear open the fabric of space to spill horror into the material universe, it is most often the Space Marine who arrives first, sometimes alone, sometimes with only a handful of brothers, to hold the line until larger forces can be mustered, or to resolve the crisis entirely before it requires further intervention. This role has shaped how the Space Marine is perceived across the Imperium. To ordinary citizens, he is less a soldier than a figure of legend, a a living relic of an age when gods and demigods walked among men. Many who witness a space marine in person describe an experience closer to religious awe than military encounter. Entire cults have formed around individual chapters, their battle brothers venerated as saints by populations who have never spoken to one directly. This veneration is not discouraged by imperial authorities, who understand its value in maintaining morale and loyalty across a population that might otherwise despair at the endless wars fought in humanity's name. Yet for all the glory attributed to the Space Marine, his existence carries a profound and often unspoken cost. The transformation that grants him his strength also separates him, irrevocably, from the humanity he was born into. He does not marry. He does not raise children, since the genetic modifications that reshape his body render him incapable of conventional reproduction. An irony not lost on those who study the Adeptus Astartes. Since the only inheritance a Space Marine passes on is genetic material extracted after death, refined into genoseed for the next generation of recruits. He does not retire in any meaningful sense, since a battle brother who survives long enough typically continues serving his chapter in some capacity until death claims him, whether in battle or more rarely, through the slow toll of centuries. His relationship to time itself is altered by his transformation. While not immortal, a Space Marine's enhanced physiology allows him to live for centuries beyond an ordinary human lifespan, meaning he may watch the civilizations and cultures of his recruitment world rise and fall, while he himself remains largely unchanged, a soldier out of time, bound to brothers who share his condition, rather than to the fleeting generations of ordinary humanity. Some accounts suggest that this isolation, more than any wound suffered in battle, represents the truest sacrifice demanded of those who undergo the transformation. Not merely the alteration of the body, but the slow and permanent severing of the bonds that tie a person to the ordinary rhythms of human life. 10,000 years after the first legions marched beneath the Emperor's banner, the institution of the Space Marine endures, largely unchanged in its fundamental purpose. Even as the galaxy around it has fractured and reformed in ways its original architects could scarcely have imagined, new chapters continue to be founded from the genoseed of ancient lineages, their fortress monasteries rising on worlds across human-occupied space, their battle brothers drawn from boys who will never again know the lives they were born into. What remains most remarkable about this institution is not simply the scale of the biological transformation involved, extraordinary as that transformation is, but the persistence of the system that sustains it, a network of fortress monasteries, ancient rites, and genetic inheritance that has functioned in some form for 10 millennia, surviving civil wars, heretical uprisings, and the slow erosion that claims most human institutions over time. The Space Marine stands as both weapon and symbol, a soldier engineered beyond the limits of ordinary human capability, and a living reminder of the lengths to which the Imperium has gone and continues to go to ensure its own survival. Whatever judgment history ultimately renders upon the methods of his creation, the Space Marine remains, by every measure that matters to those who depend on him, exactly what he was designed to be: a guardian standing at the furthest edge of humanity's reach, holding the line against a darkness that shows no sign of relenting.